The institution of marriage itself has undergone tremendous change in recent decades.
If you go back before the 20th century, the idea that marriage was based on love and intimacy and a good sexual relationship over many decades was not what people expected. I mean, a marriage was based on doing your duty, living with your family, and getting along, but that didn't mean that you felt particularly close to your partner. The idea that, you're supposed to be able to communicate, that comes in much later.
Gradually over time, what's happened is it's become much less of a social institution and more of a personal couples relationship. And it's just a very personal thing based on your feelings about somebody. And of course, once your feelings change, why, you can bag it if you want, and that's what more and more people have done.
This new perspective on marriage and divorce, like many other enormous cultural shifts, first took hold in the mid-1960s.
I was around in the 60s. It was a special time. I mean, Vietnam War was going on, civil rights movement, then the women's movement, and then the gay and lesbian movement. There was this shift of beliefs about what it was to be a good person, what it was to be a man or a woman. The way we thought about things changed a lot. And part of what changed was family in that period. So the divorce rate really shot up in the late 60s.
So we also had, beginning in about 1970, increase in cohabitation. There's an association between cohabitation and an increased risk of divorce. It's also important to keep in mind, with respect to all of these family trends, that it was only in about 1960 that we had cheap, safe, and effective contraception. And I think it's hard to overestimate the effect that probably had on a lot of these trends. We had dramatic changes in gender role attitudes, what's appropriate for a man and a woman to do. We had dramatic changes in attitudes towards sex outside of marriage. We had dramatic changes in attitudes towards having children outside of marriage.
The biggest marital change is probably the decoupling of marriage and child rearing. It used to be the case, that's why you married. And if you ask people, what's marriage all about? Well, it's to provide a safe sanctuary for raising children. If you ask people today what the main purpose of marriage is, only about 20% of the population comes up with children. That is not what they think. And so children really is a kind of a after product of marriage. And so once you get that point of view in your mind, that's why we can break up so easily when there are children involved. That's why there's such a high out-of-wedlock birth rate, which is over 1/3 in this country, the ratio of out-of-wedlock births to all births, and much higher in European nations. Marriage and children simply aren't linked together much anymore.